My father died last week. He wasn't old, wasn't sick. He left the house with his rifle slung over his back, our dog at his side. They made a pair, the two of them. A man and his best friend, my mother had once said. They had gone hunting in the woods, as they always did. Father would shoot a deer and drag it back home, butchering it and storing it away for the next few months. Our freezer always had venison, rabbit, meat, or some kind or another. With winter approaching quickly, the air smelling cold and heavy, Father had decided to go on one last hunt for the season. Never mind the odd footsteps in the mud, he told me. He needed to provide for his family, so he and Charlie had wandered off into the woods. Mother and I heard barking after a few hours, the familiar sound of Charlie chasing something down. Father's rifle rang out in the quiet afternoon, winter beating down on us all and turning the sky dark at such an early time. We had expected him to come home after that. Normally, within an hour of that rifle fire, he would come huffing and puffing through the yard, tired, exhausted, but smiling. Proud of his work as a man, he had once told me. This time, however, he did not come through within an hour. He tottered up the stairs of the porch, nearly slammed his head against the door. If Mother hadn't opened it, I think he might have split his skull on the frame. Charlie was not dancing at his heels. In the dim porch light, we could see blood splattered across his jacket, his neck, across his face. My brother, Warren, looked afraid. "Father," he said the words in such a small voice. Our father only looked at him, a ghost of a smile on his mouth. He said nothing in return. Mother settled him on the couch, nursing him and fussing over the cut on his shoulder. He couldn't tell us where Charlie was, where his rifle had gone. When we went to sleep that night, I hadn't known it would be the last time I saw my mother, or father, or Warren. I am writing this from the darkness of my closet, my only light, the candles I managed to grab before I hid. The thing inside our house is looking for me. It already ripped my family apart. My father died a good hunter. Whatever came back wearing his skin was even better. My mother told me at a very young age that I was a sinner, that we were all sinners, kindred of the anathema. For us, there was no redemption. We were cursed with the putrid blood of 1,000 generations. The only way to relieve this torment of the soul was the wound. The wound has always been there. I've seen pictures of myself when I was a baby, and it was present already then, a gaping, pus-filled gash right above my abdomen. It's our way of repentance, my mother would say. We bleed out the bad, and thus we cleanse our spirit. My mother had her wound on her thigh, my sister on her lower back. Oozing things they were, all yellow-blue and infected, painful and unsightly. And when the wound healed, when the itching came, and the scab slowly started covering up, my mother would be there with her knife and cut it open once more. A violent slice into soft flesh, the point of the blade digging into tissue until the wound was deep enough to purify the soul once more. If we don't do this, she told me, the sin will take hold and it will devour you. My mother is dead now. Heart attack, sudden and swift. She died before her wound closed, and as such, she left this world without sin. That's what she believed anyways. My sister didn't. She hated the wound. She said it was child abuse, religious nonsense, a way for our mother to control us. Screw it, she said after the funeral. Screw everything about it. My wound is almost gone, and I don't feel any different. We were cleaning up Mom's room, my sister throwing her old dresses and shoes out the window, tears streaming down her face. I could see how much pain she was in, and I wish I'd said something, tried to convince her somehow. "We don't need it, Jonah," she said, her pale blue eyes staring into mine. "We are free now." She exposed her back to show me the wound, and I gasped loudly as I made sense of the sight. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Your wound," I stammered incoherently. "It's under your skin." Something under her skin, something squirming, flesh and pus, and boils pulsating, contracting, stretching, expanding. "Jonah," she muttered. Her body twisted out of shape, bones cracking, eyes bursting, teeth dropping to the floor, blood spraying in impossible angles as she turned inside out, and the scream, and the sounds. My God, the sounds. I stumbled back in fear and disgust, moments later realizing too late that I had backed into the open window. I don't remember much from the fall, nor my neck hitting the ground first. All I remember is darkness and screams. Where is my sister? What is my sister? I truly don't know. All I know is that I'm lying here in the hospital bed, unable to move, unable to communicate, and that my wound is itching something fierce.
This happened about 4 years ago. I was 20 at the time. The first time I met the guy who would become my grocery store stalker. He was standing outside the store collecting money for the Salvation Army Christmas time donations. I'm a fairly friendly person, so I like to say hi to people who work at places I frequent, to be nice. This guy was a kid around my age, very tall, with a mild resemblance to Lurch from the Addams Family. Dark circles under dark eyes, short black hair, kind of vacant look in his eyes. I chatted with him for maybe 2 minutes, just idle chit-chat about the weather and whatnot. Nothing particularly memorable or interesting, and then waved goodbye and went home. Little did I know, that single moment would be the start of something that would have me genuinely afraid. About 4 or 5 months passed, and I hadn't seen him again. And one day, as I was grocery shopping with a friend, when, as we were chatting, she suddenly got really quiet and kind of recoiled backwards, looking behind me. I turned around to see this guy, who had to be at least 6 feet 4 inches, towering over me, not 8 inches from my body. He said hi, and told me he remembered me from that December I had talked to him, and then asked for my number. I, being young and never having experienced this type of interaction before, told him I didn't have my number memorized, but that I would write his down and text him later. I kind of half waved my phone at him, pointing out my at-the-time boyfriend, whose picture was my wallpaper, making a point to say, "Oh look, that's my boyfriend," to the guy, hoping he would clue in, but no luck. He told me his number, which immediately upon getting I blocked, without letting him get my phone number. However, what really made my blood run cold was what he said after I put my phone away. He leaned in real close, and in a low voice, he told me, "Whatever I text you is for your eyes only." At this point, I started to feel genuinely uncomfortable. I said, "Yeah, sure, nice talking to you, but we gotta get back to shopping." And I grabbed my friend and dragged her off, shooting a panic look at her and asking why she didn't bail me out. Apparently, he scared her too with his getting so close to me and she didn't know what to do. I want to make it clear, I'm not exactly a small girl, at 5'8" and solidly built. I can certainly handle myself, and I very rarely feel intimidated or small in the presence of anyone, male or female. But this guy made me feel tiny and scared. In the months that would follow, he would make me feel truly frightened. I had hoped that creepy interaction would be the last time I saw him, but that was unfortunately not the case. After that initial meeting with him, saying that creepy thing about his text being for my eyes only, it seemed like I would run into him every single time that I got to the store. No matter what checkout lane I was in, he always seemed to appear at the end of it when I was finished shopping. And every time I was in the store, I would notice him out of the corner of my eye, watching me, no matter what area I was in. One time, I even caught him following me out to my car. At that point, I got scared and decided to say something to the managers. After letting the managers know what was going on, they assured me they would tell him not to talk to me. After that, he wouldn't speak to me, but I would continue to see him following me around the store at a distance every time I went up there. It got so bad, and I felt so frightened, that I started to be afraid to go to the store at all. But I'm one of those stubborn people who refuses to be intimidated by someone to the point where I'll stop doing something. I had hoped that maybe it was a coincidence that he was following me. After all, it was a big store, and maybe he had just had things to do that just happened to be in the areas I was shopping in. So I started to pay close attention to my surroundings. Once I started really paying attention, I realized that every single time I was up there, I would constantly notice him in the areas of the store I was in. During my last encounter with him, I went up to the store to grab just 2 or 3 items I needed for dinner that night, and I first saw him standing outside the store when I got there. And with his back to me, I quickly ran inside, hoping he didn't see me. Unfortunately, a few minutes later, I saw him at the very back of the store, and items in hand, I immediately made a beeline towards the front. As soon as I got near the checkout, I ducked behind one of the shelf displays and watched carefully at the front of the store to see if CC would appear, and he did. I watched as he looked up and down the checkout, and when he didn't see me there, I saw him step outside. At this point, I quickly ran to the nearest open cashier, rang up my items, and stuck my head out the door to look for him. I didn't see him there immediately, so I started trying to make my way back to where I was parked. I had parked a ways away, near the side of the store where a bunch of other small stores and restaurants were lined up, and as I was walking towards my car, I realized I saw him standing by the entrance I had first entered the store through, and ducked behind a pillar immediately, hoping he didn't see me. I watched carefully from behind the pillar, and as he scanned the parking lot, he obviously couldn't find me. After a minute or two, he started to walk out towards the direction of the parking lot in front of the store, and so I took that opportunity to make a run for it to my car as soon as he was far enough away that I felt safe. As soon as I got into my car, I locked the doors, and to my horror, when I looked up, he was standing there, about 15 feet from my car, with a shopping cart in front of him. I knew he followed me. He knew I knew. I fully believed he had chased after me. When I made it to my car, he grabbed the nearest cart to make it look like he was collecting them from the parking lot. I remember just feeling absolutely terrified at that moment. I went home and immediately told my grandfather what had happened. I began crying and shaking, and my grandfather told me to get in the car. We were going to settle this. He and I drove up to the store in his car, and he walked me into the store and demanded we spoke with the managers immediately, both of them. When the managers arrived at customer service, he asked me to tell them what had been happening and demanded that they ensure he left me alone or that he would involve the police. The manager swore up and down they would take care of it. As far as I know, he wasn't fired immediately, because my friend, who first encountered him with me when this whole thing began, told me that she would see him from time to time when she was there by herself, but that any time I went with her, she would never see him. I fully believe he knew whenever I was there, only this time instead of stalking me, he avoided me. Eventually, everyone who knew the situation stopped seeing him there, so I think he may have gotten fired or moved on from that store. Either way, I haven't had any issues since, but I have never in my life felt so afraid of another human being as I did that day, seeing him make eye contact with me in the parking lot as I locked my car doors. It still creeps me out to think he was watching me so closely every time I entered the store, and he could so easily avoid or follow me whenever he wanted. So to the guy who stalked me every time I went grocery shopping for 4 months straight, let's never meet again.
The elevator was fairly old, 50s to 60s was my guess. I'm no expert by any means, but it was a Westinghouse model, and I believe it's common knowledge they had black buttons on their elevators back then. The man was nervous, sweating running down his face, heavy breathing, finger constantly pounding on the emergency button. He was an elderly gentleman, fine suit, shoes sparkling like stars in the dim light. "It'll be fine," I said reassuringly. "How do you know?" he mumbled annoyedly. The elevator had stopped between floor 9 and 10. Suddenly, and rather brutally, we could hear the engine struggling, loud screeches, moans, and I suppose anxiety is a rather natural emotion given the circumstances. "When I was a child," I said, tugging the man's sleeve gently, "about 8 or 9, I found myself in a similar situation, going up, back then." "Then what?" "Then, nothing. It just stopped, just like now." The old man shuffled back and forth restlessly, his nervous gaze shifting between me and the emergency button. "And?" "Well, I'm here now, aren't I said cheerfully. He nodded weakly, a slight smile manifesting on his face. "Wait," he wrinkled his brow. "You said you were a child when it happened, yes?" "Yes. But you're a child now." I'm not sure if he noticed me grinning wildly before the lights went out, but his terrified scream might be an indicator that he did. Moments later, the elevator jolted back into action with an uncanny metallic roar, and I watched the flashing floor buttons in silence as it descended at an ever-increasing speed. 9, 8, 7. "Why is it going down?" the old man yelled. 6, 4, 1. "It's going precisely where it's meant to," I answered. G, B. The elevator stopped abruptly as it arrived to the basement floor. The old man staggered clumsily into the wall and then felt on his back with some force. The lights flickered back on, and I sat down facing him. "Are you ready?" I asked calmly. "Ready?" he stammered pathetically. "What do you mean?" "For the final descent," I shrugged. "It's coming whether you're ready or not." Before he had the time to reply, the elevator dropped. There's just no way to explain how. It's beyond physics, beyond concepts like time and space. It falls for hours, days, weeks, years, until we're there, at the very bottom floor, the basement of basements. And then it stops. "Where are we?" the man mumbled, his ashen face drained of all life. "What's behind the door?" I've never looked, I said. I'm just the operator, but I can assure you, it's nowhere good. I don't pretend to know their crimes, their unspeakable acts of cruelty and evil, gruesome perversions and corruption. I just know that they're all guilty, and that the guilty needs punishing. I close my eyes as the door opens. I cover my ears as the tormented screams permeates the air, and then I return to work.